Well, the fight to replace the late U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is now heating up. Joining us now is political analyst Paul Henderson. And Paul, will get right to it. Mitt Romney now says he supports pushing ahead with President Trump's nominee. Do Democrats have any options at this point to try to block it?
Well, it's a big blow to the Democratic Party in terms of their approach to what to do with the Supreme Court. As you know, they can't afford to lose any more than three. So losing Mitt Romney from the Republican side is a real challenge and likely means that a nominee is going to come forward. Now, what this reveals, obviously, are those candidates who have been hypocritical in their comments from 2016, indicating that they would never support a move like this, really just reveals that this is a power grab and a smokescreen for them to take action. And so on the other side, we know that the Democrats and Chuck Schumer, the minority leader on the Democratic side, is saying that if that happens, all bets are off. And Democrats are likely to take more and more radicalized approach to addressing what's going to happen with the Supreme Court. And there are a lot of really important principles on the table and a lot of really important issues to be decided right now, today.
And speaking on those issues, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death could set up a showdown on several of those issues. First, let's talk about women's rights. What could happen with abortion? We've heard that come up time and time again.
Well, abortion is going to be wrapped up in the healthcare decision, and there are a number of cases winding their way up to the Supreme Court right now. And as it stands today, without Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court, we are at a 5-3 split, with 5 of the justices being in the conservative party, supporting more of the Republican ideas. And so the challenges that we will see for women's rights are likely be tied up with healthcare, but also on the table are a number of hard-fought civil rights from the past, protection for the planet and environmental issues. There's the economy fixes that are all going to be defined by Supreme Court rulings. And this is before we even start talking about justice reforms and all of the race disparities that are on the table right now, reflective of the civil unrest going on in this country. So there's a lot on the table right now. And before we even get to this process, right at the forefront are voting rights, because right now states are fighting issues that are being decided at the federal level about the stay-at-home orders versus the mail-in votes. And those cases are going to have an impact on the election that's coming up right around the corner. And so it's a really important issue, and there are a lot of things on the table. And I think that's part of what's motivating both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, to consider all of their options. The Republicans, I think, are tempted to really just push something through and really define a court that's going to have a lasting impression. And Democrats are being pushed to consider really broad gestures and important gestures to preserve their interpretation of what the Supreme Court could look like, and to preserve many of the rights and many of the institutions that we're already familiar with in this country. So that's what's happening right now.
And you mentioned healthcare. Let's talk more about that for a second. How could the Supreme Court pick affect issues like affordable care in the act, also LGBT rights when it comes to marriage?
Well, all of those things can be affected by interpretations of the court. They can be dismantled, they can be diminished, they can be watered down. One of the approaches that I think is that we'll likely see if we continue with a conservative approach or a Republican approach on a lot of these issues are decisions that validate religious rights, are decisions that validate federal issues and federal agencies that limit state options or limit individual options. That's the approach that we're likely to see, because those are where the challenges are coming. A lot of the challenges that address issues like abortion, a lot of the challenges that limit issues like the expansion of rights for LGBT and trans communities in this country are being limited by agencies in control of the federal government, like the military, and by religious institutions that are interpreting their rights to limit, define, eliminate, or marginalize some of the rights that have been affirmed by the previous court. And so that's the direction that the fights are headed in. I think it's really telling right now that we're seeing some of those fights already in states like Texas and in Florida that are limiting access to the courts or re-enfranchising or allowing more rights back to have more people vote. Really what this means is that Democrats are considering issues to revalidate the Supreme Court by taking actions like enfranchising new states. So I think it's on the table, and this is what the Democratic Party has said, that if the Republicans push through a nominee, that they will take actions like considering enfranchising states like Puerto Rico, enfranchising and defining a state like Washington, D.C. And that's only part of the approach. One of the things that they're also going to have to do is reevaluate the filibuster, because a filibuster can be used against them regardless of what the outcome is in the election. And that's going to undermine everything they do and slow walk any chances they have of adding new seats to the court. And this is a really popular conversation going on right now, is adding these seats to the Supreme Court. There's a group called Take Back the Courts that's addressing this at a nationwide level. And it's reflective of a growing movement that a lot of Democratic candidates are signing up to, who are really concerned about this very issue today.
Yeah, and a lot of back and forth, of course, already, and more to come, I'm sure. Could it also affect the outcome of the presidential race itself, you think?
100%. I think this issue is a lightning rod, and it's rallying both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. On the Republican side, I think it's a real chance for them to define the court in a new way that's going to have a lasting impression for years to come on how this country is run and how the laws are interpreted in this country. Right now, without Ginsburg on sitting, there's a 5-3 split. And so that will be affirmed if the Republicans are allowed to put through their nominee, which I think is likely to happen, that they're going to name a candidate in the next few days, and that would give them a 6-3 majority on the court. That would make many of the progressive values, many of the liberal values, and many of the Democratic values near impossible to get through having a split like that. And so on the other side, the Democratic Party is rallying around what their options are, and they've got to take some actions if that nominee does come through. And I think that that's likely now, especially with Mitt Romney backing away from his earlier statement saying that he would not supporting a nominee during an election campaign for the president. And so both sides are rallying. All of the stakes are on the table. And I think we're going to see over the next few weeks a number of unique moves and things that had not been expected either from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. But the stage is set, and now we have to watch and see what options roll out after this nominee, which is likely to come in the next few days from the Republican Party.
There will be a lot to watch and see. Paul Henderson, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.